He did not raise his voice. He did not throw a single punch. He just stood there, a man in a worn jacket with tired eyes and absolutely nothing left to lose. And the entire room went silent. 7 armed security guards backed down. A billionaire walked away, and nobody in that restaurant ever figured out who he really was. But she did. And 3 days later, she changed his life forever. The job interview lasted 42 minutes. Nathan Cross knew it was over somewhere around the 20-minute mark, when the hiring manager, a soft-handed man named Garrett, with a Stanford MBA framed on the wall behind him, glanced at the gap in Nathan's work history and made a small sound in the back of his throat. Not a word, just a sound. The kind people make when they have already decided and are just waiting for the clock to run out. Nathan had driven 40 minutes through Seattle rain for that sound. He thanked the man anyway, shook his hand firmly, and walked out into the wet November afternoon, carrying the same folder of references he had carried in. The lobby of the Larson Group building smelled like carpet cleaner and ambition. He pushed through the glass door and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, hands in his jacket pockets, letting the cold air hit his face. His phone buzzed. He looked down at the screen. "Daddy, are we still going to the restaurant tonight?" He read it twice. Sophie had sent a follow-up before he could even type a word back. A single emoji, a birthday cake. He typed back, "Absolutely. Go get your shoes on. I'll be home in 40 minutes. He stood there one more second, staring at the rain bouncing off the pavement. Then he walked to his truck. The restaurant was called Meridian. It sat on the edge of Seattle's waterfront district, all dark wood and amber lighting. The kind of place where the breadbasket costs $12 and the wine list is longer than the actual food menu. Nathan had driven past it 100 times over the past 3 years without once considering stepping inside. Sophie had spotted it from the truck window 6 months ago and said, "That place looks like a movie." He had filed that away. He had also spent 4 full days reading online reviews, trying to figure out if he could afford one dinner there without putting rent at risk. The answer was technically yes, if he ordered carefully and skipped dessert. He decided that was fine. She was turning 7, exactly once. They were seated near the back, which was exactly where Nathan would have chosen anyway. Old habit. He sat with his back to the wall and the door in his eye line. When the server handed Sophie her menu, a thick leather-bound thing nearly as big as her entire torso. She looked at it like she had just been handed a treasure map. "Daddy," she said without looking up, "there is a pasta with truffles?" "There is," Nathan said. "What is a truffle?" "Fancy, mushroom." She wrinkled her nose. "Can I get the chicken?" "You can get whatever you want." She looked up at that, a little surprised, and then looked back down at the menu with renewed seriousness. Nathan watched her and felt something loosen in his chest. She had her mother's way of concentrating. The small crease between her brows, the way her lips moved slightly when she read. Claire had been gone 4 years now. Sophie was starting to look more like her every single month. And some days, that was the most painful thing in the world. And some days, it was the only good thing. Tonight, it was both. He ordered the salmon because it was the second cheapest entree on the menu. She ordered the pan-roasted chicken and asked the server completely seriously if the chef would consider leaving off the herb sauce. The server, a young woman who hid her smile very well, said she would ask. They talked about school. Sophie's best friend Mia had just gotten a hamster and named it Tornado, which Sophie considered a very poor name for a hamster. Nathan agreed that Tornado was probably not the hamster's vibe. Sophie laughed at that, a real laugh, the kind that made the couple at the next table glance over and smile without even realizing they were doing it. He was watching her demonstrate using a fork and a water glass exactly how Tornado had escaped from his cage during show and tell, when the noise started near the front of the restaurant. Not loud noise, that was the thing. It was controlled noise, the kind that came from people who were used to getting their way and did not need to shout about it. Nathan's eyes moved to the entrance without him consciously deciding to look. 3 men had just walked in through the front door. 2 of them were big. Not gym big, but working big. The kind of size that came from years of physical labor or security work. Shoulders thick. Arms heavy in their suit jackets. The 3rd man was different. He was maybe 60 years old. Trim, silver-haired, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Nathan's monthly rent. He moved like a man who had never once in his adult life waited for anything. They had stopped beside a table near the window. There was a woman sitting there alone, early 30s maybe, dark hair pulled back simply. She was wearing a plain navy dress, not cheap, but not flashy either. And she had a glass of white wine she had not touched. On the table in front of her was a manila folder. She had not opened it. The silver-haired man was speaking to her. Nathan could not hear the words from across the room, but he could read the body language fluently. The man was leaning slightly forward, weight on his knuckles on the table edge, not threatening in any obvious way, just present. Taking up space, making the geometry of the situation very clear. She was sitting very still. The 2 security men had positioned themselves on either side of the table without being asked. They had done this before. Nathan looked at Sophie. She was still explaining the hamster escape. "Had not noticed anything yet. Hold that thought," he said quietly. "I will be right back." "Where are you going?" "Just need to stretch my legs. Keep your eye on my salmon." She accepted this logic immediately. He stood up. He walked across the restaurant at an unhurried pace. Around him, other diners had gone quiet. In that particular way, people go quiet when they sense something wrong but do not want to get involved. A few were looking down at their plates with deliberate focus. A man at the bar had his phone halfway out of his pocket, working up the nerve to film or call someone, not sure which. The silver-haired man was talking again when Nathan arrived. Up close, the voice was low and even, the words careful. "Not asking you to do anything unreasonable, Olivia. It is a standard transfer of authority. The board will never know the timeline." He pushed the folder forward slightly. Just the signature. The woman, Olivia, had her hands in her lap. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were steady. But Nathan noticed the way her left hand was gripping her own wrist under the table. Knuckles white. "I have told you my answer," she said. Her voice was controlled, but thinner than she wanted it to be. "I am not signing anything tonight." "That is unfortunate." The man picked up her wine glass and turned it slowly in his hand, an idle gesture, like he was thinking about something pleasant. "Because after tonight, the terms change." "Excuse me," Nathan said. Everyone looked at him. He had said it the way you would say it in a grocery store if someone was blocking the aisle. Conversational, no edge to it at all. The silver-haired man straightened up and looked at him with the particular expression of someone who has never been interrupted in his life and is genuinely unsure what he is looking at. "This table is occupied," one of the security men said. "Yeah, I can see that." Nathan glanced at the man, then back at the silver-haired one. "I am not talking to you, though." He looked directly at the woman. "Are you okay? Do you want me to call someone?" A beat of silence. She looked at him, really looked at him. The way people look at you when they are trying to figure out what your angle is. He held her gaze and waited. "I am fine," she said, but she did not look away. "She said she is fine," the silver-haired man said, his tone shifting slightly, something colder underneath it now. "So why don't you—" "I heard her." Nathan looked at the man again. "Not the look you give someone you are sizing up. The look you give someone when you have already finished the calculation and moved on. I am asking her." The 2 security men shifted their weight. It was automatic, the way large men readjust when a situation is heating up. Nathan clocked it in his periphery without reacting. His hands stayed loose at his sides. His breathing did not change. The silver-haired man studied him for a long moment. He was used to reading people, that was obvious. And something about what he was reading made him hesitate. "You have no idea who I am," he said. No, Nathan agreed. I did not. Another silence. The thing about genuine stillness, not performed calm, but the real thing, is that it costs the other person energy. The silver-haired man was used to being the most certain person in any room. He was looking at someone more certain than him, and it was doing something to his math. He picked up the folder from the table. We will continue this another time, he said to Olivia. He said it like a man who had just decided to let something go, not like a man who had given up. There was a difference. He straightened his jacket, turned, and walked toward the exit. His two men followed, one of them turning back to give Nathan a look that Nathan absorbed without expression. The restaurant stayed quiet for another few seconds. Then silverware clinked somewhere. A conversation resumed. The man at the bar put his phone away. Nathan looked at the woman. She was exhaling slowly through her nose, hands still in her lap. Thank you, she said. She seemed slightly startled by how level her own voice came out. You okay? Yes. She glanced at the folder in his hand. He had picked it up without thinking when the man set it down. Now he held it out to her. She took it. I did not need... She stopped. Thank you, she said again. He nodded. You want me to have the manager call somebody? Police security, anyone? No. Quick. Firm. No. I am fine. I promise. He looked at her for half a second longer. She meant it. Or at least she had decided to mean it, which was close enough. Okay, he said. Enjoy your dinner. He turned and walked back to his table. Sophie had eaten 2 pieces of bread and was watching him with enormous eyes. Daddy, she said in a loud whisper. What happened? Nothing major. He sat down. Where were we? The hamster, Daddy, tornado, the escape. She stared at him for another moment with that expression she had, the one Claire used to call the cross-examination face. And then deciding he was not going to tell her more right now, she picked up exactly where she had left off. His salmon arrived. It was, he had to admit, excellent. Sophie's chicken was pronounced the best chicken she had ever eaten in her entire life, which was high praise from someone whose previous favorite had been the rotisserie birds from the grocery store deli. They had dessert, after all, a chocolate lava cake that the server brought with a single candle glowing in the center. When it arrived, Sophie looked at it with an expression so purely delighted that Nathan had to press his thumb and forefinger briefly against the bridge of his nose. She blew out the candle. He asked her what she wished for. I am not supposed to tell you, she said seriously. Right, forgot. She ate most of the lava cake and gave him the rest. He paid the bill. It was fine. He would manage. He helped her into her jacket, and they walked out into the November rain together. Her small hand in his, her head tipping back to catch the drops. In the truck driving home through the lit-up, wet streets of the waterfront, Sophie fell asleep with her cheek resting against the window. Nathan drove with one hand on the wheel and the radio off. He thought about the woman at the restaurant, the tightness in her jaw, the folder she had not opened. He thought about the silver-haired man's eyes, the hesitation in them when he could not figure out what Nathan wanted. People like that spent so much of their lives in rooms where everyone wanted something that they did not know what to do with someone who did not seem to want anything at all. Nathan had long since stopped wanting things for himself. He wanted Sophie to have a good birthday. He wanted the heat in the apartment to hold through winter. He wanted, distantly and without much urgency, to find a job before next month. What he did not want was to think about the military, or the things he had done in it, or the reasons he had left. He had been good at all of it, the planning, the execution, the reading of situations before they turned. He had been very good, and he had walked away anyway, for reasons that still made sense to him, even if they were hard to explain to anyone else. He pulled into the parking structure and sat for a moment with the engine idling. Sophie made a small sound in her sleep. He reached over and adjusted the seat belt where it had slipped off her shoulder. Tomorrow, he would start looking for the next interview. He would rewrite the resume again. Lead with the engineering certifications, bury the service record deeper. Try once more to make himself readable to people who only knew how to read certain kinds of experience. Tonight, though? Tonight had been good. He lifted Sophie out of the passenger seat. She woke just enough to loop her arms around his neck and put her chin on his shoulder. And he carried her up the 2 flights to their apartment, with her weight warm against his chest, and he thought, this is the thing. This is the whole thing, right here. He did not know as he shouldered the apartment door open with practiced quiet that a woman across the city was sitting in the back of a black car, with a folder in her lap and a phone in her hand. A call she kept almost making. He did not know she was thinking about a man in a worn jacket who had walked across a crowded restaurant with his hands loose at his sides and his eyes absolutely steady, and who had asked a complete stranger if she was okay, like it was the most natural thing in the world. He did not know that she had already run his face through a private security firm's recognition database, or that she was looking at a file with his name on it, or that the file was making her very, very thoughtful. He tucked Sophie in, sat on the edge of the bed until her breathing evened out, then went to the kitchen and made himself a cup of coffee he did not particularly need, and stood at the window looking out at the rain on the dark street below. 7 years old today. Growing up fast. He had to figure something out soon. He just did not know yet that something had already been figured out for him. The envelope arrived 2 days later. Not an email, an actual envelope, cream-colored, heavy stock, hand-delivered to the front desk of the apartment building by a courier in a black jacket who had not said a word beyond asking the building manager to confirm Nathan Cross lived there. Mrs. Peterson from 2B had signed for it and slid it under his door sometime around noon, along with a post-it note that read, "Package for you, looked expensive," with a small smiley face drawn beside it. Nathan found it when he got home from dropping Sophie at school. He stood in the doorway of his apartment, in his coat, keys still in his hand, and looked at it on the floor for a long moment before picking it up. His name was printed on the front in clean serif type. No return address, just Nathan Cross, personal and confidential. He opened it at the kitchen table, his coffee going cold beside him. Inside was a single card, the same heady cream stock, and a printed letter on company letterhead he did not immediately recognize. The card said in the same clean type, "You are invited to interview for the position of Director of Security and Infrastructure, Bennett Global Holdings, Thursday, 9 o'clock in the morning. Dress as business professional. A car will be arranged upon your confirmation." Below that, a phone number. He read it twice. Then he set it down and picked up his coffee and drank it cold, because he had forgotten about it again. Bennett Global Holdings. He had heard the name. Everyone in Seattle had heard the name. It was stamped on half the waterfront development signs. The kind of company that showed up in the business section of the paper more often than most people actually read the business section. Real estate, infrastructure, development. The kind of firm that built things other firms only planned. He did not know why they were writing to him. He put the card down, picked up his phone, and searched the company. Their website was the kind of corporate thing that told you everything and nothing. Mission statements, project timelines, a team page with headshots of executive staff he did not recognize. He scrolled through without lingering. Then he searched Bennett Global CEO. The result came up immediately. Olivia Bennett, 30 years old, CEO of Bennett Global Holdings, daughter of founder Richard Bennett. He stopped reading. He looked at the photo for a long moment. Dark hair, composed expression, the same face he had seen across a restaurant 2 nights ago. Sitting very still, with her hands in her lap and a folder she would not open. He set the phone face down on the table. He sat there for a while, listening to the radiator knock, thinking about the particular shape of coincidences that were not coincidences at all. He confirmed by text that same afternoon. Brief, no questions. Thursday at 9 works, no car needed. I will drive myself. He sent it, and then went to fix a leaking pipe in the building's 3rd-floor bathroom. because that was his actual job, and it still needed doing. The drive to Bennett Global's headquarters took him across the bridge and into the part of the waterfront district that was still becoming itself. Construction cranes visible above older buildings, scaffolding on half the facades, the smell of fresh concrete and cut lumber mixing with salt air off the sound. The Bennett Tower was newer than most of the surrounding buildings, glass and steel, not aggressively tall, but solidly present. The kind of building designed to look like it planned to be there for 100 years. He parked in the visitor structure, walked to the lobby, gave his name at the front desk. The receptionist, a young man with a practiced efficiency that suggested he had been trained very well, made a call, said something Nathan could not hear, then looked up with a polished smile. "Someone will be right down to bring you up, Mr. Cross." Nathan nodded and stood to the side of the desk. He did not sit in the lobby chairs. He looked at the atrium. High ceiling, clean lines, a scale model of a waterfront development project displayed behind glass near the far wall. He walked over and looked at it while he waited. The model showed a mixed-use district. Residential towers, commercial space, a public promenade along the waterfront edge. Detailed work, someone had put serious time into it. Impressive, right? He turned around. She was standing there in a charcoal blazer and dark trousers. Hair down today instead of pulled back. A tablet in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. She looked, if he was being exact about it, like a completely different person than the woman at the restaurant. More put together, more deliberate. The kind of person who had been doing this for years and had the posture to show it. But her eyes were the same. Direct and careful in equal measure. Taking stock of things without letting it show too obviously. "The waterfront district model," she said, nodding at the case. 3 years of planning. It is our biggest active project." She extended her hand. "Olivia Bennett." He shook it. "Nathan Cross, you already know that." "I do." She did not apologize for knowing it. "Why don't we go upstairs?" The conference room on the 14th floor had floor-to-ceiling windows facing the sound. And on a clear morning like this one, the water was flat and silver gray, and the Olympic Mountains were visible on the far edge of the horizon. The kind of view that made Seattle feel like it was trying to show off. There was a long table with 8 chairs, a whiteboard on one wall, a credenza with coffee and water that nobody touched. They sat across from each other. She had a folder in front of her, not the manila one from the restaurant, a different one. Blue. Thicker. She opened it, but did not look down at it right away. "I will start with the obvious thing," she said, "since I think we are both thinking about it." "Sure. I was at Meridian 2 nights ago, under a different name. I told the reservation I was in Elaine Morris." She said it evenly, like she had decided to just put it on the table. "I do that occasionally when I need to meet people in the industry in a setting that is not this one. People behave differently when they do not know who you are." Nathan waited. "The man at my table was Derek Voss," she continued. "He runs Voss Capital Partners. He has been acquiring positions in several of my company's competitor firms for the past 2 years, and about 6 weeks ago, he started pressuring me to sign documents that would quietly transfer operational authority over the waterfront project to a third-party management group his firm controls." She paused. "I have been refusing." "The folder," Nathan said. She nodded. "I was not there because I did not know where else to go. I was there because I needed to think, and I do not get a lot of chances to think without someone watching me. My own executive team is complicated right now." She closed the blue folder without having looked at it. "I had a security detail outside that night. 2 people in a car across the street. Neither of them came in when Voss showed up. That is a problem. It is one of several problems." She looked at him directly. "What I need, Mr. Cross, is someone who is not already inside this organization. Someone whose loyalty has not been established in the wrong direction. Someone who can look at the security infrastructure of this company and the waterfront project specifically and tell me where the holes are. Not just the physical ones." Nathan leaned back slightly in his chair. "You ran a background check. My legal team ran a background check, yes. And you read the service record." I read what was available. She said it without hesitation. 10 years SEAL Team 4, then 6. Engineering background before you enlisted. Your father was a construction foreman. You came out with a degree equivalent in structural engineering from the Navy's training programs, and a work history that civilian firms do not quite know what to do with. She glanced down at the folder for just a moment. You have been working as a building maintenance supervisor for the past 3 years. Before that, 8 months with a private security firm in Portland that shut down after a contract dispute. Meridian Security, he said. They owed 3 contractors back pay when they closed. I was one of them. I know. She paused. You have a daughter, Sophie, 7 years old as of 2 days ago. He did not say anything to that, just held her gaze. I am not mentioning her as leverage, Olivia said, and her tone shifted slightly, less boardroom, more like a person talking to another person. I am mentioning her because it is part of who you are, and I would rather have all the information out on the table from the start. That is how I prefer to work. Okay, he said, then let me put something out on the table too. Go ahead. You picked me because of what happened at the restaurant. You were watching a stranger make a decision under pressure, and you liked what you saw. That is a reasonable thing to base a first impression on. He paused. But a first impression is all it is. You do not know how I work. You do not know how I handle complexity or bureaucracy or executive politics. And based on your description, those are things I am going to run into every single day in this building. She studied him. Is that a concern or a warning? Both, probably. Fair. She folded her hands on the table. I will tell you what I do know. I have hired 43 people in the past 2 years, some of them with brilliant credentials, some of them with recommendations from people I have trusted for a decade. And I have spent the last 6 weeks trying to figure out which 3 or 4 of them are leaking confidential information to Derek Voss. She did not raise her voice, it just got more precise. I watched you walk across a full restaurant to check on a woman you had never seen before, with 2 large men standing between you and her, because it was the right thing to do. You did not look around to see if anyone was watching. You did not take out your phone. You just did it. She picked up her coffee cup, realized it was empty, set it back down. That is not a small thing. That is actually a very specific quality, and it is surprisingly hard to find. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Outside, a container ship moved slowly across the upper edge of the window frame, heading for the port. Tell me about the waterfront project, he said. She talked for 40 minutes straight, and he did not interrupt much. The Bennett Global Waterfront redevelopment was the largest private development contract in the city's history. $230 million over a 5-year build. Replacing a deteriorating industrial section of the waterfront with mixed-use development. A public market, residential towers, an expanded promenade. The project had been her father's original vision, started before he stepped back from the company 2 years ago for health reasons. She had inherited it at 28 when she took the CEO role, and she had spent the first year just learning the depth of it. The security infrastructure was a mess. Not by design, but by the specific kind of entropy that happens to large projects when multiple contractors handle different pieces without anyone overseeing the whole picture. Physical security, digital security, and document management were being handled by 3 separate firms that did not communicate with each other. Construction contracts worth tens of millions were passing through an approval chain with gaps in it you could drive a truck through. Vendor access was logged inconsistently. 2 construction managers had been replaced mid-project under circumstances described to the board as performance issues, and had never been formally reviewed. And for the past 4 months, detailed project documents, specs, timelines, bid evaluations, had been appearing in the hands of Voss Capital Partners before they had even been finalized internally. Someone is feeding him information, Nathan said. Yes, from inside your executive team, almost certainly. Her jaw did the thing he had noticed at the restaurant, a slight tightening, a controlled version of anger. I have 8 senior executives with access to the relevant documents. I have been trying to narrow it down for 3 months and I keep hitting walls. Because whoever it is has been very careful. And the people I would normally ask to investigate work for me and might be the problem. So you cannot trust your own security team. I cannot trust my own security team. And you want to bring in someone from outside. I want to hire someone from outside to oversee all of it, the physical security, the digital infrastructure, the access protocols, the contract management chain. Give them the authority to restructure how it all works. She met his eyes. Officially, Director of Security and Infrastructure. The salary is listed in the packet on the table. The actual job is to find the leak and help me close it, before Derek Voss finds a way to take this project away from the company my father built. Nathan looked at the packet. He had not touched it yet. He reached over now and opened the front page. The salary figure was on the second line. He kept his face neutral, but something shifted behind his sternum. A recalibration of the morning's expectations. It was not life-changing money in the way the phrase usually meant, but it was real money, stable money, the kind of number that meant Sophie could stay in her school, and the heat could stay on, and maybe in 6 months there would be something in savings again. He closed the packet. I need to know one more thing, he said. Ask it. The night at the restaurant. Voss came to you personally with security at a place you were eating under a fake name. How did he know where you were? Olivia was quiet for a moment. I have been thinking about that since it happened, she said. The reservation was made from a private phone. The restaurant was not on my calendar. I told 2 people I was going out that evening and did not say where, she paused. My assistant Marcus and my CFO Daniel Holt. Those are 2 of your 8. Yes. He nodded slowly. He understood now the shape of what she was dealing with. Not just a leak, a specific kind of betrayal. Intimate and calculated. Coming from people who sat in meetings with her and called her by her first name and smiled when she walked in the room. All right, he said. All right, you will take it. All right, let us talk about what I would actually need to do the job. He pulled the packet back toward him. Starting with access, I need to see everything. The security contracts, the vendor logs, the document management system, the construction site access records, everything. Not the version that has been tidied up for an audit, the raw version. Olivia's expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. That I can arrange. And I am not reporting to your CFO or your COO or anyone on your executive team. I report to you directly, or I do not take the job, already in the contract. He looked at her for a moment. She had prepared for this conversation carefully, which told him something. She had anticipated the questions he would ask, which told him something else. Can I ask you something, he said. You have been asking me things for the past 40 minutes. This one is different. He paused. At the restaurant, when I walked over there, you could have told me to leave. She considered it. I thought about it. Why did you not? She picked up the empty coffee cup again, sat it back down again. A small, unself-conscious gesture, like she was buying herself one more second. Because you were not performing, she said finally. You were not being brave or impressive. You just seemed like someone who noticed something wrong and did something about it. That is rarer than it sounds. She looked at the table for a moment, then back at him. And honestly, I was grateful. I do not particularly like admitting that, but there it is. He nodded. He appreciated that she had said it plainly, instead of wrapping it in something more sophisticated. When do you need an answer? He asked. I would prefer today, but I understand if you need time. He thought about the apartment, the radiator, the second cheapest salmon, Sophie's cross-examination face when she wanted the truth about something. Today is fine, he said. I will take it. He started the following Monday. His office was on the 12th floor, 2 floors below Olivia's. A room with a window and a desk and a computer system that the previous security director had customized in ways that made it immediately clear the previous security director had not been especially interested in security. Access credentials were stored in a spreadsheet, An actual spreadsheet, unencrypted, saved to a shared drive that 6 administrative staff could reach without any log of who had opened it or when. Nathan sat in front of it for a while on his first morning, his coffee steaming, and he thought about all the ways a person could drive a truck through something. His first call was to the IT director, a tired-looking man named Phil Garrett, who arrived at Nathan's office door with the expression of a man who expected to be blamed for something and had learned not to fight it. "Walk me through the access structure," Nathan said. "Everything. Start at the top." Phil sat down and started talking. Nathan listened and took notes by hand in a yellow legal pad, because he had decided very quickly that nothing was going into the company's digital systems until he knew who could see what. The picture that emerged over the first 3 days was exactly as bad as Olivia had suggested, and in a few places, worse. Vendor access to construction site systems was logged, but the logs were reviewed monthly rather than in real time, which meant a security breach could sit undetected for weeks. The document approval chain for construction contracts required 3 executive sign-offs, but one of those sign-offs had been quietly automated 6 months ago. Someone had set up a rule that auto-approved contracts below a certain dollar threshold, which meant you could theoretically structure a large payment as 10 smaller ones and move it through without a second pair of eyes. Nathan wrote that down and underlined it. He also walked the construction site at the waterfront on his second day. Hard hat and steel-toed boots he had bought the night before. He drove down before the crew arrived, getting there at 6 in the morning to a site that was still quiet except for the early shift foreman. A broad-shouldered man named Terry Stokes, who had been on the project since the foundation pour and had opinions about the previous security protocols that he delivered in the direct, plain-spoken style of someone who had been waiting for someone to actually ask. 3 contractors have shown up in the past month with access badges that should not have worked, Terry said. He was standing beside the half-frame structural shell of what would eventually be the public market building, his breath fogging in the cold morning air. "I flagged 2 of them. Filed reports. Got told regardless it was a data entry error." What kind of contractors? Electrical subcontractors, but they were not heading for the electrical work. I watched one of them. He was in the southeast corner of the site, where the document station is. That is where the physical copies of the spec sheets are kept during active construction. "What did you do?" Terry looked at him with a flat expression. "I told the last security director. 3 weeks later, nothing. So I started keeping my own log." He pulled out his phone and held it up. Photographs, time-stamped, badge numbers, faces. "Send those to me," Nathan said. "All of them. You are actually going to do something about it." "Yes." Terry looked at him for another moment, then pulled out the phone and started forwarding photos. By the end of week 1, Nathan had a list. Not a complete picture yet, but a list. Anomalies, inconsistencies, timestamps that did not match the workflow they were supposed to document. He compiled everything in a single file on a laptop he had bought himself with his own money and had not connected to the Bennett Global Network. Old habit. You do not keep sensitive notes on someone else's system when you are investigating someone else's system. He met with Olivia at the end of the week in her office, which was larger than his but less organized. Papers in several overlapping stacks. A second monitor permanently showing a live feed of the construction site cameras. A half-drunk glass of water on the desk that looked like it might have been there since Wednesday. He sat across from her and went through what he had found. She did not interrupt. She had a way of listening, still focused, not performing attention but actually paying it, that he had come to recognize as one of the things she was genuinely good at. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The automated approval rule," she said. "Set up 6 months ago. I checked the system logs. It was configured under Daniel Holt's administrator credentials. Daniel could say someone else used his login. He could. That is why I need to keep looking before we say anything to anyone." He leaned forward slightly. "This is the part where I need you to be patient. I know that is not easy given what you are dealing with." She gave him a look that might have been dry humor in a different context. I have been patient for 3 months. A little longer, he said. If we move too early and spook whoever is running this, they will cover their tracks and we lose everything. She looked out the window at the water for a moment, then back at him. Okay, she said. But I need to know one thing. What is that? Do you trust your own read on this? Or are you telling me what I want to hear? It was a direct question. She asked it directly, without apology. He respected that. I trust my read, he said. I have been wrong before, but not about this kind of thing. She held his gaze for a moment, then she nodded. Then keep going, she said. He drove home that evening through the tail end of rush hour, the city's lights smearing gold and red across the wet road. He picked Sophie up from the after-school program. She had made a papier-mâché volcano that had apparently, spectacularly failed to erupt in the intended direction. And they drove home talking about the structural integrity of papier-mâché in general and what specifically had gone wrong with the baking soda to vinegar ratio. The thing is, Sophie said very seriously from the back seat, I think I needed more base material. The sides were not thick enough to contain the pressure. Nathan glanced at her in the rearview mirror. That is a very good analysis, he said. She accepted this with a small, satisfied nod. I am going to try again on Saturday. We can do that. She looked out the window at the passing streetlights, and after a moment she said, Daddy, are you less worried? He looked at her again in the mirror. What do you mean? You have been worried a lot about work and stuff, I can tell, because you get kind of quiet in a different way than your regular quiet. She said it matter-of-factly, not accusingly, just reporting what she had observed. But tonight you seem less worried. He was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said. Yeah, maybe a little less. She seemed satisfied with that. She turned back to the window. He watched the road, thinking about automated approval rules and time-stamped photographs and a woman in a charcoal blazer who listened the way most people forgot to. And the particular feeling of a problem that was large and complicated and entirely within the range of things he knew how to do. He pulled into the parking structure and cut the engine. All right, he said, let us go figure out the volcano. The volcano worked on Saturday. Sophie had recalculated the ratio, more baking soda, less vinegar in the initial pour, with the vinegar added in 2 stages rather than 1. When it went off at the kitchen table, with a sheet of plastic underneath it, the eruption went straight up and outward in a clean ring, exactly as she had planned. And she pumped her fist once, a gesture Nathan recognized as entirely her own. Nothing borrowed from television or other kids, just pure, unfiltered satisfaction at a problem solved. He took a photo on his phone and looked at it later that night, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open. It was one of those photos that catches something real, not posed, not pretty in any formal sense, just his daughter in her weekend sweatshirt, with baking soda on her chin, and her arm raised like she had just won something, which she had. He put the phone face down and went back to the laptop. The pattern in the financial logs was not obvious. That was the first thing. Whoever had set this up had not been sloppy. The transactions that had moved through the automated approval rule were real transactions, legitimate vendors, real contracts, actual work being done on the project. But scattered among them, at irregular intervals that looked like nothing if you were scanning quickly, were payments to a vendor listed as Cascade Infrastructure Partners. Small at first, $18,231, building slowly over 8 months. Nathan pulled up the vendor registration for Cascade Infrastructure Partners. Business address in Portland. Registered 2 years ago. Principal listed as a man named Arthur Peel. He searched Arthur Peel. Nothing useful. A LinkedIn profile that looked like it had been created and then immediately abandoned. A business registration in Oregon. A phone number that, when he called it from his personal phone on Saturday morning, rang 9 times and went to a voicemail box that was full. He sat back in his chair. In his experience, and he had a specific kind of experience with people who constructed false identities for operational purposes, the tells were usually in the registration details. Real businesses had histories, reviews, complaints, tax disputes, employees who had left and said things on the internet. Shell companies were clean, artificially clean, the kind of clean that took deliberate effort. Cascade Infrastructure Partners had no reviews, no complaints, no history of any kind before its first payment from Bennett Global. He wrote that down on the legal pad. Monday came with a low gray sky and rain that had decided to be serious about itself. The kind of November rain Seattle did when it wanted to remind you that summer had been a temporary arrangement. Nathan was at his desk by 7:15, before most of the building had even arrived, when his office door opened without a knock. He looked up. Marcus Chen, Olivia's assistant, was standing in the doorway, a compact man in his early 30s, always moving slightly faster than the room required, with an expression today that Nathan could not immediately read. "She needs you upstairs," Marcus said. "Now, if possible." "What happened?" "I will let her explain." Nathan closed the personal laptop. He did it without hurrying. Just a clean close, and stood up and followed Marcus to the elevator. Olivia's office had 2 other people in it when he arrived. A woman he recognized as the company's general counsel, Patricia Vane, a 60-year-old with silver-streaked hair and the particular stillness of someone who had spent decades in rooms where things were going wrong. And a man he did not know, late 40s, charcoal suit, the kind of face that gave nothing away by design. Olivia was standing at her window with her back to the room. When Nathan came in, she turned around. He could see the night she had had, in the set of her jaw and the absence of any of the careful composure she usually maintained. "Close the door," she said. He closed it. "This is Richard Lau," she said, gesturing at the man in the charcoal suit. "He runs internal investigations for our legal firm. Patricia brought him in this morning." She looked at Nathan directly. "Someone filed a complaint with the board last night, alleging that our new director of security and infrastructure has been diverting project funds into a private account." The room was very quiet. Specifically, Patricia said, opening a folder on the conference table, "The allegation is that a vendor account created in your name prior to your employment, a company called CrossPoint Infrastructure LLC, has received 4 payments totaling $312,000 from the Waterfront Project Fund over the past 3 weeks. Nathan looked at her, then at the folder. She slid it across the table, and he looked at the documents inside. Bank records, wire transfer confirmations, a business registration for CrossPoint Infrastructure LLC, with his name, his home address, his social security number. "I have never heard of this company," he said. "The business was registered in Washington State 14 days before your interview at Bennett Global," Patricia said. "The registration uses your personal identification information. Someone registered it using my information." "I did not register anything. That is your position," Richard Lau said. His voice was neutral in a practiced way. "That is the fact," Nathan said, equally neutral. He looked at Olivia. "The timing on this, I know," she said, 14 days before my interview. Someone knew I was going to be hired before I knew I was going to be hired." Olivia's expression shifted. "Something moving behind it. Or someone created a contingency in case I hired anyone to actually look at the project." "Who filed the complaint?" Nathan asked. Patricia and Lau exchanged a look. "The complaint was submitted anonymously to 2 board members," Patricia said. "But the board members who received it are calling an emergency session for Wednesday. If they move to investigate formally, you will be placed on administrative leave pending the outcome." "And if I am on administrative leave," Nathan said slowly, "I am not in the building. I am not looking at anything." Nobody said that was not exactly right. He picked up the bank records from the folder and looked at them again. Clean documents. The wire transfers showed a payment originator that matched Bennett Global's project fund, routed through an intermediate account at a regional bank, landing in CrossPoint's account. It was a competent fabrication, the kind that would hold up to a quick look by someone who did not know what to look for. But he knew what to look for. "I need 48 hours, he said. He set the papers down. "Before the board meeting, I need to keep working." "Nathan," Patricia started, "I am not asking to investigate the complaint. I am asking to keep doing what I was already doing, because what I was already doing is going to answer the complaint." He looked at Olivia. "You brought me in because you needed someone to find this. I am close. This," he touched the folder lightly, "this is them telling me I am close." Olivia held his gaze for a long moment. "Richard Lau said Miss Bennett protocol would suggest." "Thank you, Richard," she said without looking at him. "I will call you this afternoon." It was not dismissive exactly, but it was final. Lau picked up his jacket from the back of a chair and left without pushing it further. Patricia lingered a moment, looked at Olivia, then at Nathan, then gathered her folder and followed. The door closed. Olivia turned to the window again. Below them, through the rain, the waterfront construction site was visible. Cranes standing still in the weather, yellow hard hats moving between prefabricated shelter stations. "Tell me where you are," she said. He told her. "Cascade Infrastructure Partners, Arthur Peel, 8 months of escalating payments. The automation rule that had let it all move quietly." She listened with her arms crossed, not defensively, but the way she stood when she was holding something in. "How much has gone through," she asked, "into Cascade?" "About 900,000, but that is not the whole picture. I think Cascade is a collection point, a step in the chain, not the end of it." He paused. "I need the outgoing transfers from Cascade's account. I cannot get those from inside Bennett Global Systems." "That is on the bank side. Patricia can subpoena that. Not without tipping off whoever is watching that we are looking at it. The complaint that got filed last night, someone is monitoring this investigation. They filed that complaint within 48 hours of me requesting the financial integration logs." She turned around. "You think it is someone in IT. I think it is someone with access to the request logs." "That could be IT, could be legal, could be executive level." He pulled out his legal pad. "Who knew about the financial log request besides Phil Garrett?" She thought about it. "I knew. Marcus knew because he scheduled the meeting with Phil. And Daniel Holt would have been notified automatically. Any major data request from the finance systems goes to the CFO as a standard alert." Daniel Holt, Nathan said. It was the same name she had given him in the first week. One of 2 people who had known her location the night at Meridian. "He has been with the company 11 years, she said. There was something in her voice that was not quite defending Holt, more like grieving the possibility. "He was my father's hire. He was at my father's retirement dinner." I know, Nathan said. He said it quietly. He understood what it cost to suspect someone like that. She looked at the legal pad. "What do you need to get into Holt's email without him knowing I have been there? And I need the physical access logs from the document station on the construction site, the ones Terry Stokes has been keeping, cross-referenced with the days those payments moved. The email access is going to require Patricia. Do it through her personal account, not the firm's. If someone is watching the legal firm's intake..." "I understand." She nodded. "I will call her from my cell on the way home tonight." She paused. "Nathan." He looked up. "If the board moves forward Wednesday and votes to place you on leave, then I will be on leave," he said. "But I will still have the laptop." She almost said something, and did not. He understood what she was holding back. That if the board pushed hard enough, they could make the leave mean something more permanent. That the complaint, false as it was designed to do exactly that. "I will handle the board," she said finally. He believed her. Whether she could was a different question. He drove to the construction site that afternoon in the rain. Found Terry Stokes in the site foreman's trailer, eating a sandwich over a spread of blueprints, looking like a man who had been working 12-hour days for so long he had forgotten what shorter ones felt like. Nathan sat across from him, and they went through Terry's log together. The handwritten one in a battered spiral notebook that Terry had been keeping since August, because Terry was the kind of man who did not trust systems he had not built himself. Badge numbers, times, descriptions. This one, Nathan said, pointing to an entry from 6 weeks ago. The man in the southeast corner? You wrote down his badge number. Yep, that badge number does not appear in the official access log for that day. Terry looked at him. I know. Meaning it was either logged and then deleted, or the badge was cloned. A legitimate number used on a duplicate card. Which means somebody inside gave them a real badge number to clone. Yes, Terry put down his sandwich. How deep does this go? Deep enough. Nathan looked at the notebook. Can I borrow this? Terry slid it across without hesitation. You going to tell me what is actually happening? When I can, not yet. Terry accepted that with the pragmatic resignation of a man who had worked enough large projects to know that information moved in its own time. You be careful, he said. I have seen projects go sideways before. But the ones where somebody is actually pulling strings, those get mean. I know, Nathan said. He drove back to the office with the notebook on the passenger seat, turning pieces over in his mind the way he had been trained to. Not forcing them, just holding them loosely and waiting for the shape to declare itself. The shape was declaring itself. That evening, working at his personal laptop at the kitchen table after Sophie was in bed, he pulled the payment timestamps from Cascade Infrastructure Partners and laid them beside Terry's notebook entries. 5 of the payment dates corresponded to days when the construction site had been accessed by the mystery badge. The access happened first. Always 2 to 4 days before the transfer, someone was physically collecting documents, and then the payment followed. He stared at that for a while. Physical collection meant the digital security was not the primary channel. Someone was pulling hard copies of spec sheets and bid evaluations, the kind of documents that did not leave a trail when they left the site, because the logging system for physical documents was the weakest link in the whole chain. He wrote, Physical first, digital second, not a hacker, someone operational. Underneath that he wrote, someone who knows how construction sites work. He looked at that for a long time. Tuesday moved fast, and not in a good way. The board had gotten word through channels Nathan did not have visibility into that something significant was happening with the investigation and the complaint. 2 board members called Olivia's office in the morning. A third sent a formal written request for a status update. By noon, the emergency session that had been scheduled for Wednesday had been moved up to Wednesday morning. 8 o'clock, which meant Nathan had roughly 18 hours. He had gotten the email access through Patricia. She had done it quietly, using a legal instrument he did not ask about and did not need to know about. The export arrived in his personal inbox at 2 o'clock that afternoon as an encrypted file. He opened it and started reading. Holt's email was professionally maintained in the way that told Nathan immediately that the man understood he could be read. The compromising material, if it existed, was not going to be sitting in the sent folder with a subject line that said, "Here is the secret information I am leaking." He read through 3 months of emails looking for absence, the things that should have been there and were not. An executive getting documents about the waterfront project should have generated email traffic, responses to documents, questions, approvals with comments. Holt's email had very little of that for the relevant period. What it had instead were short, clean replies. Received. Thank you. To documents Nathan knew from the project logs had contained significant information requiring executive review. A man who was passing documents along did not need to comment on them, he just needed to receive them and forward them elsewhere. And the forward function left no trace, if you used a separate device. At 3:15, going through the metadata on Holt's email receipts rather than the content, Nathan found something. Several of the received thank you emails had been opened on a device that was not Holt's registered company phone or his registered company laptop. A third device. The device ID was a string of numbers that, when he ran it through the IT system's device registry, came back as unregistered, which meant it was a personal device Holt had never disclosed to the company. in violation of IT policy that required registration of any device accessing company email. Nathan sat very still for a moment. A second phone. Receiving the emails, then presumably forwarding from that second phone to wherever the documents were going. It was clean. It was careful. It was also exactly the kind of operational tradecraft a person learned from somewhere specific. He pulled Holt's personnel file from the HR system and read it for the first time properly. 11 years at Bennett Global. Before that, 4 years at Meridian Capital Group, a mid-sized investment firm. Before that, 3 years at a consulting company called Apex Advisory Partners. He searched Apex Advisory Partners. The firm had dissolved 7 years ago. Its principals had scattered to various financial firms around the Pacific Northwest. One of them had gone on to found Voss Capital Partners. Nathan read that sentence twice. Then he closed the laptop and sat in the silence of his office and let the shape finish declaring itself. Derek Voss, Daniel Holt. They had not met at a conference or been introduced through industry contacts. They had worked together. Holt had been placed inside Bennett Global, possibly deliberately, possibly opportunistically, but inside regardless, and had been there, patient, trusted, 11 years deep, waiting for a project large enough to be worth the play. He called Olivia. She answered on the second ring. He could hear traffic noise. She was in a car. "Where are you?" he said. "On my way back from a board member's house. Trying to buy time." A pause. "Tell me you have something." "Apex Advisory Partners," he said. "Look it up when you can. Then look at the founding principles of Voss Capital." A long silence. "Daniel," she said finally, "not a question. He has been careful. But the metadata on his email access shows a second device, unregistered, that was receiving project documents, and his payment history goes back further than I thought. I found a third channel I had not seen before. Total diversion is closer to 2 million, not 900,000. He heard her exhale. One controlled breath through her nose, the way she did when something landed hard. "Wednesday morning," she said. 8 o'clock, I know. I will be ready. Nathan." She stopped, started again. "If they vote to remove you before you can present, they will not," he said. He said it not to reassure her, but because he meant it, and she could probably tell the difference by now. Another pause. "What do you need tonight?" Terry's badge logs cross-referenced against the site entry system going back 8 months. "Can you get me root access to the site camera archive?" The physical cameras, not the digital feed. The recording system logs separately. "I will call Phil. Tell him to send it to my personal email, not the company system." Understood. He worked until midnight. Sophie had been at his neighbor Janet's place that afternoon. Janet was a retired school teacher on the first floor who had taken to Sophie the way practical, warm women sometimes took to children who read too much and asked good questions. And Sophie had started appearing at Janet's door on her own initiative, which Nathan found both convenient and touching in the way small organic kindnesses are touching. He picked her up at 9, got her to bed by 9:30, and went back to the table. The camera archive from the construction site came through at 10:47. He opened it and started pulling footage from the days that matched Terry's notebook entries. Scrubbing through the southeast corner angle, the document station. The temporary structure where physical spec sheets were kept during active construction phases, the footage was the grainy, slightly fish-eyed product of inexpensive security cameras that nobody had bothered to upgrade, which meant it had the authentic ugliness of something that had not been set up for anyone's benefit. He liked that. Staged security systems looked cleaner. He found what he was looking for at 11:23. The man on camera was not one of the electrical subcontractors Terry had flagged. He was wearing a hard hat and a high-visibility vest. Standard site wear, anonymous. But his build and his gait were specific enough that when Nathan paused the footage and compared it to a photograph he pulled from the company's internal directory, the match was not difficult. He sat with it for a moment. Marcus Chen, Olivia's assistant. Not Holt alone then, both of them. Holt as the financial channel, and Marcus as the operational one, The person who knew Olivia's schedule, her movements, her location, on a given evening at a restaurant under a fake name, the person who had arranged meetings, processed requests, and had 12th floor access to every piece of information that moved through the executive suite. Nathan pressed his thumb and forefinger against the bridge of his nose and held them there for a few seconds. He thought about how many times Marcus had been in the room during his conversations with Olivia. How many times the man had closed a door, or brought coffee, or mentioned in passing that Olivia was running late, or was in with the board. The daily, granular presence of someone who was supposed to be invisible. He opened a new document on the personal laptop and started building the chain. Every link documented in order. Holt establishing the financial channel through Cascade. Marcus providing physical access and operational intelligence. The complaint filed anonymously to the board. Marcus would have had the board members' private contact information, the kind of detail that lived in an assistant's address book. The registration of Crosspoint LLC using Nathan's personal information, which Marcus would have had from the employment paperwork he had processed when Nathan was hired. It was a good operation. It had been patient, it had been smart, and it had been very nearly invisible. But it had moved when it felt threatened. That was the error. When people shifted from slow accumulation to active countermeasure, they left footprints. The complaint was a footprint. The fake company registered with his information was a footprint. The rushed timing of all of it was a footprint. He finished the document at 12:41 in the morning, printed it on his home printer, all 41 pages, put it in a folder. He looked at the folder for a moment. Then he looked at the photograph still open on his laptop screen. Sophie, baking soda on her chin, fist in the air. He closed the laptop. He needed 4 hours of sleep. And then he needed to be in that boardroom by 7:30. He set his alarm and went to bed, and was asleep in under 6 minutes. The way he had learned to sleep in places where the next day was going to require everything he had. Cleanly, completely, with no wasted time on the edge of it. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The city was quiet. Somewhere across it, in a building with a view of the water, a board of directors was preparing to decide the future of a company, based on a lie that had been 4 months in the making. Nathan Cross slept through all of it, and woke at 5 in the morning sharp, made coffee, got dressed, and picked up the folder from the table. He got to the building at 7:22. The lobby was quieter than usual, not empty, but running on a different frequency than a normal workday morning. The way buildings felt when something significant was about to happen inside them, and the people who worked there could sense it without being told. The security guard at the front desk gave Nathan a look that lasted half a second longer than usual. Nathan badged through without slowing down. The elevator opened on 12. He went to his office first, set the folder on the desk, made a list in his head of the order things needed to happen in the next 35 minutes, then picked up his personal laptop and the folder and went back to the elevator. Olivia was already in the 14th floor conference room when he arrived. She was standing at the window with a coffee she was not drinking. Dark blazer, hair pulled back. She turned when he came in with the expression of someone who had been awake since 4 o'clock and had made peace with that fact. "Patricia is here," she said. "She is in the small conference room down the hall, going through your documentation." "Good." He set the laptop and folder on the table. "How many board members are coming in person?" 6. 2 are dialing in. That is 8 of 11. Enough for a quorum. Enough to vote. She paused. "Gerald Marsh is the one who received the complaint first. He has been the loudest." Nathan knew the name. Gerald Marsh had been on the Bennett board for 9 years, a former commercial real estate developer who had made a significant fortune before the 2008 correction, and had spent the years since serving on boards and forming opinions. He had never particularly liked Olivia's appointment as CEO. Nathan had gathered that from the company's board minutes, which he had read in his second week. "Is Holt coming?" Nathan asked. "He is expected at 8. He is not a board member, but Marsh specifically requested he be present to speak to the financial irregularities." She said it with a flatness that told Nathan she understood exactly what that meant. Marsh, whether knowingly or not, was playing the hand that Holt had dealt him. And Marcus, she said, he had called her at 6:30 that morning to tell her about Marcus, and she had been silent for long enough on the other end that he had said her name twice. When she answered, her voice had been very controlled and very quiet, which he was learning meant she was handling something that had actually gotten through the composure. Marcus called in sick this morning, she said. He knows, Nathan said. I know he knows. She set the coffee cup down on the windowsill. He probably figured it out last night. The moment Holt realized you were in the camera archive, they would have talked. Yes. He opened the laptop. Patricia needs to call her contact at the FBI field office before 8. I sent her the wire transfer documentation for Cascade last night. That crosses into federal territory, bank fraud, possibly wire fraud. If we can get a federal hold request moving before the board meeting starts, it complicates Holt's ability to walk out of that room a free man afterward. She is already on the phone with them. He looked up at her. I called her at 5:45, Olivia said. There was something in her expression, not quite defiance, not quite fear, something that sat between the two and had its own name that he did not have a word for yet. I was not going to wait and hope the timing worked out. He nodded. That was the right call. And he did not say so because she did not need him to. They spent the next 20 minutes at the conference table going through the presentation structure. Nathan had built it in a specific order, not the order he had uncovered the information, but the order that would be hardest to argue with. Start with the facts already documented in the company's own systems. The things no one could claim he had fabricated, establish the baseline. Then layer the financial evidence. Then the physical evidence from the construction site. Then the metadata. Save Marcus for last. Because Marcus was the piece that would hit hardest, and he wanted it to land in a room that had already been thoroughly undermined. You are not going to give them an exit, Olivia said, reading through the outline. No. Marsh is going to try to turn this into a question of your credibility. He is going to say you constructed this to deflect from your own... I know what he is going to say. Nathan looked at her. Which is why the first 20 minutes of the presentation are entirely built from Bennett Global's own internal records. Every document is company-generated and company-stamped. I have not touched the source files. Patricia has authenticated copies of everything. If Marsh wants to say I fabricated those... He is saying the company's own systems are fabricated. She was quiet for a moment. You have done the 4. He did not answer that directly. I have had to convince people of things they did not want to believe, he said, in rooms where the stakes were higher than this one. She looked at him for a moment with an expression he could not entirely read, then looked back at the outline. The board members arrived between 7:50 and 8:05. Nathan stayed in the conference room while Olivia greeted them in the hall, watching the waterfront through the window. The cranes were moving now. The site crew started at 7, regardless of what was happening in boardrooms above them, because concrete and steel did not care about corporate politics. He respected that about physical work. It had a stubbornness to it that he found grounding. Patricia came in at 2 minutes to 8. She was carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the expression of a woman who had just gotten off a significant phone call and was processing the outcome. The field office has a financial crimes agent who reviewed the wire transfer documentation, she said, keeping her voice low. They are treating it as a priority referral. They cannot make a move before the meeting, she paused, but they will have someone in the building by 9. Nathan absorbed that. Okay, there is something else. She set the portfolio on the table and opened it. The bank that holds the Cascade infrastructure account, their compliance department flagged the account 18 days ago. Automated fraud detection. They put a soft hold on outgoing transfers. She looked at him. Whoever was running the Cascade channel may not know that yet. The last payment they sent to the final destination, we have identified that account, and the hold means the money has not moved. That was the first genuinely good news of the morning. Nathan let himself feel it for exactly 1 second. Where is the final account registered in the Cayman Islands? The account owner of record is a holding company called Aldridge Pacific Limited. She paused again. Aldridge Pacific Limited is a subsidiary of Voss Capital Partners. The room was very quiet. Nathan looked at the window. The cranes moved against the gray sky. "That is the chain," he said. It was not to Patricia, it was just said. The way you say something when the last piece lands and the shape is finally complete. "That is the chain," she agreed. The boardroom was 3 doors down, a formal room that the conference room on 14 was not, with a longer table and higher-backed chairs and a credenza along one wall with the company's founding documents displayed under glass. Richard Bennett had built this room to look like permanence, and his daughter now sat at the head of its table, with 8 board members arranged around it, and the particular stillness of someone who understood exactly what was at stake and had decided not to show it. Nathan sat to Olivia's right, Patricia beside him. The laptop open and connected to the room's display system. Daniel Holt was seated along the side wall, not at the table, not a board member, but present as requested. He was wearing a dark suit, his face arranged in an expression of cooperative concern that Nathan observed without reacting to. Marcus's chair, which had presumably been arranged for him, was empty. Gerald Marsh was at the far end of the table from Olivia. A broad-shouldered man in his late 60s, white hair, the confidence of someone who had been the smartest person in most of the rooms he had entered for the past 4 decades. He had a printed copy of the complaint in front of him, one he had brought himself. "Before we begin," Marsh said before Olivia could speak, "I want to establish the basis for this session. A formal complaint was received by 2 board members alleging material financial misconduct by a recently hired executive. Under our governance charter, that triggers a mandatory review." He looked at Nathan directly. "Mr. Cross, you are welcome to be present for the presentation of the complaint. After that, it would be standard practice for you to step out while the board deliberates. I would like to request that Mr. Cross remain for the full session." Olivia said it. "That is irregular, Gerald." She said his name with a measured weight. "I have asked him to remain because he has material information relevant to this board's decision, and I think everyone in this room will want to hear it before any vote is taken. I am asking for 20 minutes. If after 20 minutes you want him to step out, I will not argue it." Marsh looked at her. He looked at Nathan. He looked at the empty chair along the wall where Marcus should have been. 20 minutes, he said. Nathan stood up. He started with the automated approval rule. Walked him through it on the screen, the rule itself, the timestamp, the administrator credentials. He kept his voice level. He did not editorialize. He let the documents speak, and explained what they meant in plain language. The way he would have explained a structural flaw in a building to a client who was not an engineer. Here is the thing. Here is why it matters. Here is what it allowed to happen. 3 of the board members were leaning forward within 5 minutes. One of them, a woman named Sandra Okai, the only person at the table Nathan knew had a background in finance, had pulled out a pen and was making notes on the printed agenda in front of her. Marsh was listening. He was not showing what he thought yet, but he was listening. Nathan moved to Cascade Infrastructure Partners. The payment history, the vendor registration, the search results for Arthur Peel. He showed them the phone number that went to a full voicemail box. He showed them the registration date predating his own employment, and the business address that, when mapped, corresponded to a UPS store in Portland. I want to be direct about something Nathan said, and the room gave him a particular kind of attention that told him people were tracking. The complaint filed against me alleges that CrossPoint Infrastructure LLC, a company registered in my name, received project funds. That is accurate. Funds did move to that account. He paused. What the complaint does not address is that CrossPoint LLC was registered using my personal identification information 14 days before I was interviewed for this position. I had no knowledge of its existence until Patricia showed me the documents Monday morning. He brought up the registration document on screen. The business address on the registration is this building, specifically the 12th floor, my office. That landed. He watched it move across the room. The slight shift in posture, the exchanged glances. Someone registered a company in my name using an address that would not exist as my workplace for another 2 weeks. Nathan said it clearly. That means whoever filed this complaint against me knew I was going to be hired before I was hired. Marsh said, that is a significant claim. It is a documented fact. Nathan brought up the employment offer letter timestamp alongside the LLC registration timestamp. Side by side, the dates were unambiguous. The offer letter was dated 4 days after the LLC was registered. Marsh looked at Daniel Holt. It was an involuntary look, the kind you make when you want to check something against someone's face. Nathan had been waiting for it. He did not point it out. He just noted it and moved on. The Cascade infrastructure payments, he said, $900,000 over 8 months through the automated approval channel. I mentioned the collection point earlier. Here is the destination. He brought up the wire transfer documentation. The Cayman account. The Aldridge Pacific subsidiary structure. He walked them through it one step at a time. Aldridge Pacific Limited is a wholly owned subsidiary of Voss Capital Partners, the same firm that has been pressuring Bennett Global's CEO to relinquish operational control of this project. Sandra Okai stopped writing. The 2 board members on the conference call had been quiet for the past 10 minutes. One of them, Nathan could hear it in the background of the call, was typing. I want to show you one more thing, Nathan said, and then I will sit down. He brought up the construction site footage. He had edited it to 45 seconds, the relevant window, the southeast corner, the man in the hard hat and high visibility vest moving to the document station and spending 3 minutes there before walking out. He played it once, then paused on the clearest frame, then brought up the company directory photo beside it. The room was very quiet. Marcus Chen, he said. He said it without drama. Executive assistant to the CEO, 12th floor access, full executive suite clearance, and daily visibility into every document, meeting, and movement within this company's leadership. He paused. Mr. Chen called in sick this morning. I would recommend the board authorize Patricia to notify the relevant authorities about his whereabouts before this session concludes. He looked at Marsh. Marsh was looking at the screen. Then Nathan sat down. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. In a boardroom, that is a significant silence, Daniel. Marsh's voice was different now, slower, more careful, like a man stepping onto ice he was not sure would hold. Is there something you want to say? Holt had been sitting along the wall, his face arranged in that expression of cooperative concern. For the past 20 minutes, Nathan had been watching him peripherally the entire time, the way he had been trained to watch. Not directly, not obviously, just maintaining awareness of the edges of the room. Holt had been very still, in the way of someone who has decided that stillness is their best available strategy. I think Holt said carefully that what we are seeing here is a very sophisticated attempt to redirect attention from Daniel. Olivia's voice was quiet, completely quiet, not raised, not sharp, just a particular kind of final. Don't. Holt looked at her. I have known you for 11 years, she said. You were at my father's retirement dinner. You gave a toast. She held his gaze. I am asking you not to sit in this room and make this worse than it already is. Something moved across Holt's face. Not remorse exactly, but the recognition that the position he had occupied for 11 years had just ended, and that the specific performance he had been giving was no longer going to work. He looked at the table. He did not say anything else. The door to the boardroom opened. 2 people came in, a man and a woman, both in business attire that was not quite corporate. Carrying credentials they held up without theater. The man addressed Patricia first, then the room. FBI Financial Crimes. We have the federal hold request on file with this building as the business address for several entities under investigation. We will need to speak with Daniel Holt and coordinate with your legal counsel regarding document preservation. He looked at Holt with the particular professional neutrality of someone for whom this was just a Tuesday. "Mr. Holt, if you would come with us, please." Holt stood up. His chair scraped back. He straightened his jacket, a reflexive gesture meaningless, and walked to the door with the two agents. He did not look at Olivia. He did not look at Nathan. He looked at the middle distance, the way people look when they have decided the only dignified option left is to not look at anything specific. The door closed behind them. The boardroom was very quiet for a moment. Gerald Marsh was looking at the space where Holt had been sitting. Then he looked at Olivia. Then finally, he looked at Nathan. And his expression had changed in a way that Nathan read as a man reassessing a significant number of assumptions he had made over the past 12 hours. "I owe you an apology," Marsh said. He said it to Nathan directly, which Nathan had not expected and respected. "I received that complaint and I moved on it without asking enough questions about its source. You followed your governance charter," Nathan said. "That is what it is there for." Marsh looked at him for a moment, then nodded once. "Yes, well." He looked at Olivia. "I think we can table the motion regarding Mr. Cross's employment status." "I think so too," she said. "We will need to address the board's oversight of the project financial controls going forward." "What you have described, the approval automation, the access gaps, those are governance failures as much as security failures. I have recommendations," Nathan said. "Written up. I can have them to Patricia by end of week." Marsh looked at him with the expression of a man revising his picture of someone in real time. "How long did it take you to find all of this?" 3 weeks, Nathan said. "The information was there, it just needed someone to look at it straight." Marsh made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was in that neighborhood. The sound of a man acknowledging something. He looked at his copy of the complaint, then turned it face down on the table. "Then let us get to work," he said. The rest of the morning was administrative in the way that only the aftermath of serious events could be. Statements to the federal agents, document preservation orders, a call with the company's insurance carrier that Patricia handled while Olivia sat in her office with the door open, and Nathan sat across from her desk going through the list of immediate security changes that needed to happen before close of business. Marcus Chen was picked up at 11:40 at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, attempting to board a flight to Vancouver. Nathan heard about it from Patricia, who heard it from the federal agent, who communicated it with the same professional neutrality he had used in the boardroom. Marcus had a bag packed, a one-way ticket, and had apparently believed right up until the moment the airport security officers appeared that he had read the timeline correctly and had enough of a head start. He had not. Nathan wrote Marcus Chen apprehended on the bottom of his legal pad page, put a line through the name, and felt nothing particular about it, which was its own kind of feeling. At 12:30, Olivia's office had emptied of everyone except the two of them. She was sitting at her desk, chair turned slightly toward the window, looking like someone who had just finished running a very long race and had not decided yet whether to sit down or keep moving. "Your father is going to hear about this," Nathan said. It was not a question. "I called him this morning, before the board meeting." She paused. "He wanted to come in. I told him not to." She paused again. "He built this company for 30 years. He does not need to watch it being dragged through a federal investigation on a Tuesday morning. He also built it well enough that it survived this," Nathan said. She turned from the window. She looked at him with something direct and unguarded in a way she usually was not. And he understood it was because she was tired enough that maintaining the composure required more effort than she had left. "You knew before the board meeting," she said. "You had everything you needed yesterday. You could have gone to the FBI directly, without going through the board at all." "Yes." "Why did you not?" He thought about how to say it accurately. "Because the company needed to see it happen in that room. The board needed to be part of the resolution, not just informed of it afterward. If I had gone around them, Marsh would have spent the next year second-guessing every finding and looking for the angle." He paused. "You need your board functional. That meant letting them do their job, even when their job was being used against you." She was quiet for a moment. That is a very patient way to think about it. I have had time to get patient. She looked at him steadily. The seals? He did not answer that. You do not talk about it, she said. Not accusatory, just an observation. Not much, no. Why? He looked at the window. The cranes were still moving. Because what I did there was a specific thing in a specific context, for specific reasons. And most of those reasons do not translate cleanly into civilian life. And because, he stopped for a moment, when you have done certain kinds of work, people either want to make you into something you are not, or they do not know what to do with you at all. It is easier to just lead with what I know how to do now. She looked at him for a long moment. Which is considerable, she said. He did not respond to that. He looked at the legal pad. I need to brief the construction site team this afternoon. Terry needs to know the badge issue is being resolved, and I want to do a full security audit of the vendor access system before end of week. That is the channel most exposed right now. Nathan. He looked up. You can take the afternoon, she said. The audit can wait one day. He considered it. Sophie gets out at 3:15. I know. He looked at her. There was something in the way she had said it, not strategic, not performed, just the simple fact of knowing a thing because she had paid attention. He found he did not have a response that felt right-sized to the moment. So he just nodded. He closed the legal pad, capped the pen, picked up the personal laptop and the empty folder, and stood up. I will have the security recommendations to Patricia by Thursday, he said. Friday is fine. He walked to the door. He had his hand on the frame when she said his name again. For what it is worth, she said. And then she seemed to think about whether to say the rest, which was unusual for her. She was not typically a person who left things half said. I have sat across from a lot of people in this building who were very certain they were the smartest person in the room. She paused. It is different when it is actually true, and the person does not seem to care whether you notice. He stood in the doorway for a moment. I noticed the important things he said, that is all. He left before it could become something neither of them was ready for. He picked Sophie up at 3:20, 5 minutes late because of traffic on the bridge, which Sophie clocked immediately and reported with precise disappointment. And they drove home in the late afternoon light that November sometimes offered, as a kind of apology for the rest of itself. The low sun catching the water of the Sound and turning it briefly gold. How was your day? Sophie asked, with the particular seriousness she brought to the question on days when she sensed it mattered. He thought about the boardroom, about Holt's chair scraping back, about Marcus Chen's one-way ticket, about the look on Olivia's face when she had said, I have known you for 11 years, in a voice that was completely quiet. Complicated, he said, but good. She considered this. Did you fix something? Yeah, he said. I think so. Good, she said, satisfied, and turned to the window to watch the city go by. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the radio off and the heat running low. And somewhere on the bridge, with the water on both sides of them catching the last of the afternoon light, he felt something in his chest that had been wound tight for 3 weeks. Longer. Maybe longer than 3 weeks. Begin finally, and with some reluctance, to loosen. It was not over. There would be federal proceedings, board restructuring, security overhauls, months of careful work rebuilding what had been compromised. He knew that. But the thing that had needed to break had broken in the right direction, in the right room, in front of the right people, and he was going to be there for what came next. The federal investigation took 4 months. Nathan had known it would take at least that long. These things moved at the pace of institutions, which is to say, carefully, and with significant paperwork. But knowing it intellectually and living inside it were different experiences. December passed in a blur of depositions, document reviews, and security restructuring that kept him at his desk until 7 or 8 most evenings. January brought the formal indictments, Daniel Holt on 7 counts, including wire fraud conspiracy and breach of fiduciary duty, Marcus Chen on 5 counts, including the identity theft charge that Nathan found in some quiet part of himself, the most personal. Derek Voss was indicted in February after federal prosecutors finished untangling the Aldridge Pacific subsidiary structure and tracing the full chain of payments from Cascade Infrastructure through to Voss Capital's operational accounts. The number, when prosecutors released it publicly, was $4.3 million, not the $2 million Nathan had estimated at midnight in his kitchen. More. Accumulated over a longer period than he had initially traced, through channels that had been running quietly even before the waterfront project had reached its current scale. The Seattle business press covered it extensively. Nathan avoided reading most of it. What he could not avoid was the period immediately after the indictments, when Bennett Global's board commissioned an independent governance review. And Nathan spent 3 weeks being interviewed by the review team. Patient, thorough people from a Chicago firm who asked the same questions 17 different ways and seemed genuinely puzzled when his answers stayed consistent. "You are not protective of the company's prior practices," one of the reviewers observed during their 3rd session. A woman named Dr. Carol Finch, who had the particular academic precision of someone who had spent decades studying institutional failure. "I was hired to fix them," Nathan said. "Being protective of them would defeat the purpose." She had written something down. He never found out what. The governance review produced 48 recommendations. Nathan's security restructuring plan had already implemented 31 of them before the report was even finalized, which Dr. Finch noted in her cover letter to the board with language that he thought was probably about as close to impressed as her professional register allowed. Through all of it, the waterfront project kept moving. That was the thing that surprised him most in retrospect. Not that institutions could survive serious corruption, but that the physical work was so indifferent to it. The construction crew showed up every morning at 7. The structural steel went up on schedule. Through December and into the new year, Terry Stokes ran the site with the same unhurried competence he had been running it with before Nathan ever arrived. And when Nathan came down to walk the site on Thursday mornings, a habit he had established in his 2nd week and maintained without fail, Terry would hand him a coffee from the site trailer, give him a brief rundown of progress. Without ceremony, without performance, southeast corner of the market building goes up next week, Terry said, one Thursday in late January. Standing at the edge of the framing area with steam rising off his coffee in the cold morning air. "We are actually ahead of the December pour schedule. That is good news." "Yep." Terry sipped his coffee. "You know what I've been thinking about? The access log gaps from August." He looked at the half-framed building. "I knew something was wrong. Then I filed those reports." He paused. "Nothing happened for 2 months, so I am thinking, I could have kept filing reports forever, into the void." He looked at Nathan. What made the difference was that the right person actually looked at what I was saying. Nathan thought about that for a moment. "You kept the notebook," he said, "without anyone telling you to, without any guarantee it would matter." Terry shrugged. "Seemed like the honest thing to do." "That is what made the difference," Nathan said. "I just got there eventually." Terry made a sound that might have been agreement, and might have been the kind of noise people make when they have thought something through and arrived at a simple conclusion, and are comfortable with simple conclusions. They stood there a while longer in the cold, watching the crew work. March arrived, and with it a change that was smaller on paper than it felt. Olivia called Nathan to her office on a Tuesday afternoon, not urgently, not with Marcus-style efficiency, just a straightforward message through the new assistant, a calm and deliberate woman named Ruth, who had been recommended by Patricia, and who had, in Nathan's assessment, the rare quality of being thoroughly uninterested in anyone else's business. He went upstairs. Olivia was at her desk, jacket on, the second monitor still showing the construction site feed. She had updated the camera system in January, higher resolution. Real-time review, a proper logging structure, and the feed was cleaner now. The image sharp enough that he could read the hard hat numbers from across the room. She had a folder on the desk. A different kind than before, not the blue investigation folder, not formal HR materials. Just a plain folder with a printed document inside it. "I want to make a change to your role," she said. "If you are willing." He sat down. "Tell me." "The waterfront project needs an executive lead for the final phase, not just security oversight, full operational coordination, construction completion, tenant integration, the public promenade launch, the opening event." She slid the folder across. Chief Operations Executive for the Waterfront Redevelopment. It is a new title. The compensation is different. He opened the folder, read the first page, looked at the compensation line, and kept his face where it was. "That is a significant change," he said. "The project is worth $230 million, and it has 14 months until the public opening." She said it evenly. "I need someone who understands the physical work, the security requirements, the financial controls, and the stakeholder management. I do not have another person in this organization who covers all 4 of those." She paused. "I also trust you. That is not a small thing, given recent history." He looked at the second page of the document. The scope of responsibility was detailed and specific. She had written this herself, or close to it. He could tell by the way it was structured. The directness of the language without the padding that tends to accumulate when documents pass through too many hands. "There is going to be pushback from some of the board," he said. "Marsh has come around, but a few of the others still see me as—" "I have already spoken to the board," she said. "The vote was 8-3 in favor of the appointment." He looked up. "When?" "This morning." She held his gaze. "I was reasonably confident you would say yes." He looked at her for a moment. "That confident? You are sitting here, are you not?" Something moved at the corner of her mouth, not quite a smile, but the first cousin of one. He looked at the folder again, at the title on the first page, Chief Operations Executive, Bennett Global Waterfront Redevelopment. He thought about the Larson Group building in November. The soft-handed manager with the Stanford MBA making a sound in his throat at the gap in the employment history. He thought about standing in the parking lot in the rain, looking at Sophie's birthday cake emoji on his phone. He thought about the way things that seem finished sometimes are not finished. They are just waiting for the next part to start. "I will need to restructure the site reporting chain," he said. "I expected that. And I want to bring Terry Stokes into a formal site supervisor role. He has been doing the work unofficially for a year." "Already approved. Ruth has the paperwork." He closed the folder. "All right," he said. "Yes," she nodded once. "Clean, without theater." He appreciated that about her more than he could have articulated at the beginning. The absence of performance in the moments that mattered. He told Sophie that evening after dinner, while she was working on a school project at the kitchen table. A poster about ecosystems that had gotten significantly more ambitious in scope than the assignment required, involving a hand-drawn food web that now covered most of the poster board and had begun incorporating color-coded arrows. "I got a new job," he said. "Different title. More responsibility." She looked up. "Is it better?" "Better than what?" "Better than before." He thought about it honestly. "Yeah, it is." She looked at him for a moment with the cross-examination face. "Are you going to have to work more?" "Some, but not the kind of more that means I am not around. The project is in its last phase now. I will be managing completion, not chasing problems." She seemed to be calculating something. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, I think it is good." She said it with the particular authority of a 7-year-old who has decided something. "You are good at fixing things." She looked back at the poster. "Can you help me figure out where the decomposers go? I think I put them in the wrong layer." He pulled a chair over and looked at the poster. They spent 40 minutes on the food web. He suggested moving the decomposers to the base layer, which she initially resisted. Then, after looking at it from the other side of the table, conceded was structurally correct. "You were right," she said, with the slight reluctance of someone who had preferred their original position. "Doesn't happen every time," he said. She laughed. a real one, the kind that did not know it was happening until it already had. The months that followed had their own texture. Nathan had worked hard jobs before. Jobs where the physical and mental demand ran parallel, and you fell into bed at night genuinely used up. But the last 14 months of the waterfront project were a different kind of hard. The complexity was horizontal rather than vertical. Not one deep problem, but dozens of concurrent ones, each requiring a different mode. One morning he would be in a contractor dispute about subfloor drainage in the residential tower. The afternoon would bring a stakeholder meeting with the city's planning department about the public promenade alignment. Evening sometimes involved reviewing tenant contracts for the commercial spaces, a task he had never done before. He approached it with the same systematic method he brought to everything. Learn the structure first, then the exceptions, then the cases where the structure failed. He made mistakes, some of them significant. In April, he approved a material change to the market building's interior layout without fully consulting the lead architect, which resulted in a 2-week delay and a conversation with the architect, a precise and understandably irritated man named David Song, that Nathan handled by listening, acknowledging the error specifically, and asking Song directly what he needed to make the correction work. Song had seemed slightly startled by this approach, as if he had expected a more defensive response. And then the two of them had sat down and solved the problem with a functionality that, afterward, became one of the better working relationships on the project. He got better at the parts he was not naturally good at. The political navigation of a large project with multiple stakeholders, the city, the board, the contractors, the future tenants, was a kind of work that required a patience different from tactical patience, a longer and more social form. He was not a natural at it. He tended toward directness in contexts where indirectness was the convention, and occasionally said things plainly that the convention expected to be wrapped. Olivia noticed this and told him so one evening in April, when they were both still in the building at 7:30, which had become an occasional but regular occurrence. Not planned, just the overlap of two people with a lot of work and a shared interest in having it done correctly. You told the planning department rep that his traffic flow objection was based on a model that had not been updated in 3 years, she said. They were in the small conference room, with takeout containers between them and the city development plan spread across the table. It was Nathan said. He has been with the city for 22 years. The model was still 3 years old. Nathan, she looked at him over her chopsticks. You were right. And it is going to cost us 6 weeks of goodwill recovery, because he is going to remember how right you were every time he sees you in a room. He thought about that. So I should have been wrong more gently? You should have let him arrive at the conclusion? She set the chopsticks down. Ask questions until he realizes the model is outdated, instead of telling him. He discovers it. It becomes his insight instead of your correction. He was quiet for a moment. That is slower. It is faster in the end. He looked at the city development plan. I will work on it. I know you will, she said. She said it without condescension and without flattery, just the plain acknowledgement of a thing she had observed, which was he had come to understand how she gave most of her meaningful feedback. Directly, without decoration. He looked at her sideways. You are pretty good at this. At what? Managing people who are bad at being managed. She picked up her chopsticks again. I have had practice. He was not sure if she meant in general or specifically, and he did not ask. And she did not clarify, and they ate their takeout over the city development plan, and went back to work. And that was its own kind of comfortable. The thing between them grew. The way things grow when two people are too busy and too honest to perform it. Not in dramatic declarations or constructed moments, but in the accumulation of small, true things. He noticed when she was running on less sleep than she needed, which happened in cycles he had learned to recognize. Her sentences got slightly more precise when she was tired, as if she was conserving processing power. She noticed when he was carrying something from Sophie's world into the workday, a particular distracted quality that sat behind his eyes on the mornings when Sophie had been unwell or upset, which he never mentioned, and she never asked about directly, but sometimes addressed sideways, scheduling late afternoon meetings earlier, without explanation. They did not talk about it. For a long time, they did not talk about it, partly because the work was genuinely consuming, and partly because they were both people who had learned through different histories to be careful with things that mattered. Nathan had not been with anyone since Claire. That was not a conscious decision. He had not made a rule about it. But the years since had been about Sophie and survival and the slow reconstruction of something stable. And there had not been space or energy or inclination. He was aware that this was a fact about himself. He had gotten comfortable with it, the way you get comfortable with any long-standing condition once you stop expecting it to change. He did not know what Olivia's history was specifically. He knew she had built a company and carried her father's legacy and survived the kind of betrayal that made you recalibrate who you trusted and how much. He knew she was careful in the particular way of someone who had been careless once and remembered the cost. What he knew for certain was that she was the most straightforward, complicated person he had ever met. One evening in late August, with the project in its final months and the public promenade 90% complete, they walked the waterfront site after the crew had left. This happened occasionally. A site walk in the evening to review progress, to assess the space as it was becoming, rather than as it appeared on blueprints. The promenade ran along 600 meters of former industrial waterfront, and in the low evening light, with the sound going silver and the mountains visible on the far edge of the horizon, it was possible to see what it was going to be. Sophie was with Janet that evening. She had started going there for dinner on the occasional Thursdays Nathan worked late, and Janet had begun teaching her to cook, which Sophie approached with the same systematic intensity she brought to food webs and volcano ratios. Nathan and Olivia walked the length of the promenade without much conversation, which was comfortable in a way that conversation sometimes was not. At the north end, where the public market building's terrace overlooked the water, they stood for a while. 8 months, Olivia said, since the boardroom. She was not looking at him, looking at the water. About that, when my father hired Daniel Holt. I was 19. I was still in college. Holt used to bring me coffee when I came into the office during breaks. She was quiet for a moment. I keep thinking about that, the coffee. People are what they do over time, Nathan said, not what they do in one moment. I know that. She looked at the water. It is still strange, the small things. They are what you remember. He understood that. He understood it from a different angle, the specific grief of losing someone good, rather than the specific grief of losing your trust in someone you had thought was good. Different shapes of the same hollow. He did not say that, because it was not useful. But he understood it. The project is going to be good, he said instead. And then, because the evening was honest in a way that evenings sometimes were, you did this. Your father started it, but you held it through everything that happened. And it is going to be good. She turned and looked at him, the particular directness of her gaze that he had clocked in a restaurant 9 months ago. That same quality of actually looking, rather than performing looking. I had help, she said. Some, she agreed. She looked at the water again. Nathan. Yeah, I am not good at... She stopped, started again, differently. I do not do things halfway. When I commit to something, I am thorough about it. That is... She paused. I am telling you that because I think you should know it before anything, rather than after. He was quiet for a moment, looking at the water alongside her. A container ship was moving across the far edge of the sound, slow and deliberate, the way large things moved when they knew where they were going. I have a 7-year-old, he said. She is the center of everything. That is not going to change. I know. She said it without hesitation. I have known that since the birthday cake text. He looked at her. Marcus showed me your phone contacts when he was processing your employment paperwork, she said. Sophie's name was at the top. The most recent message was her birthday cake emoji. She paused. I thought, whoever this man is, At least I know what he is about." He stood with that for a moment. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. They walked back along the promenade in the dark. Neither of them said anything else about it that evening. But something had been said, and they both knew what it was. And the knowing was enough for now. The opening of the Bennett Global Waterfront District happened on a Saturday in October, which the weather cooperated with, in the reluctant way Seattle weather sometimes did. Not warm, not sunny by any southern standard, but clear and still, with the kind of light that made everything look like it had been recently cleaned. Nathan was there at 6 in the morning, walking the site one last time with Terry before the public arrived. The market building was finished. David Song's interior layout in its final corrected form, which was better than the original, and which Song had acknowledged with the precise understatement of a man who did not make unnecessary gestures, but made the necessary ones. The residential towers were fully occupied, had been for 2 months. The commercial spaces along the promenade were open. Restaurants, a bookshop, a small independent grocery, a kayak rental operation that had been Terry's suggestion, and which had made Nathan privately think that Terry had been underemployed as a construction foreman for most of his career. The promenade itself, in the early morning light, was better than the blueprints. That happened sometimes. The physical reality exceeded the planned version, not because the plan was wrong, but because the material world added texture that drawings could never carry. The salt air, the sound of the water, the way the stone pavers absorbed and reflected the light. These things were real in a way that models simply were not. Walking it before anyone else arrived, Nathan felt the specific satisfaction of completed work. Not pride exactly, just the solid acknowledgement of a thing done. "Good, right?" Terry said beside him. "Yeah," Nathan said. "Good." Terry nodded like a man whose opinion had been confirmed. "All right, go find your people. I have got a site to hand over." Nathan went to find his people. Sophie was with Olivia near the market building entrance, which he had known, because he had dropped Sophie at Olivia's apartment that morning at 7:30. A thing that had become occasional over the summer and was now, without anyone formally deciding it, simply a thing that happened. Sophie had opinions about Olivia's apartment, specifically about its kitchen, which she considered underutilized, and its bookshelf, which she considered excellent. And Olivia had opinions about Sophie, which she expressed primarily by listening to her with the same focused attention she brought to board meetings, which Sophie had noticed and appreciated. With the seriousness of a child who was used to being half listened to by adults, they were standing together now in front of the market building's entrance arch, and Sophie was explaining something with both hands, which meant it was something structural, and Olivia was listening with her arms loosely crossed and her head slightly tilted. And the two of them together, in the October morning light, looked so naturally like a unit that Nathan stopped walking for a moment and just looked at it. He was not a man who had many unguarded moments. The training had taken most of them, and the years of being the only parent had taken most of what was left. But this one landed before he could meet it. The sight of his daughter gesturing at an arch and explaining load distribution to a woman who was listening like it mattered, in a place he had built, on a day that would not have existed without every specific decision that had led to it. And he stood there in the October light and felt the full weight of it, which was not a sad weight and not a triumphant one, just real, just the specific gravity of a life that had arrived somewhere worth arriving. Sophie saw him and waved with the arm that was not mid-explanation. He walked over. "I was telling Olivia about the Keystone Principle," Sophie said, "how arches work." "I know the Keystone Principle," Nathan said. "I know you know. I was telling her." Sophie looked at the arch with the expression of someone who was satisfied with the construction. "It is good," she pronounced. "High praise," Olivia said. She was looking at Nathan with the slight warmth she showed in moments like this one, not performed, just present. "It is, actually," Nathan said. "She does not give it easy." "I noticed," Olivia said. Sophie had already moved on. walking toward the promenade where the first members of the public were beginning to arrive through the south entrance. Families, couples, people with dogs. A group of elderly men who moved with the deliberate purpose of people who had decided to witness something. Sophie stood at the promenade railing and looked at the water with her chin up and her hands in her jacket pockets. And she looked from a slight distance so much like her mother that Nathan had to press his thumb and forefinger briefly against the bridge of his nose. He stood beside Olivia, and they watched Sophie watch the water. "She asked me last week," Olivia said quietly, "whether I thought the promenade railing was the right height." "What did you say I had asked the structural engineer?" She paused. She said she had already figured it out herself and it was fine. She was just checking my methodology. Nathan looked at his daughter. "That sounds right. She is going to be formidable," Olivia said. "She already is." They stood there for a while as the district filled with people, more of them than Nathan had expected this early, drawn by something he had not fully predicted, which was that the place had a quality you could not put in a prospectus. It was somewhere people wanted to be, and that was different from somewhere people were supposed to go, and the difference showed immediately in how they moved through it. Slower, looking around, stopping to look at the water. The formal ribbon cutting was at noon, a brief ceremony on the promenade with the mayor and 2 city council members, and Gerald Marsh representing the board, who had, in the past 4 months, become a genuine and practical ally rather than an obstacle, which Nathan attributed partly to Marsh's native pragmatism and partly to the specific way that being wrong in a boardroom in front of 8 colleagues tended to clarify a man's thinking. Marsh shook Nathan's hand before the ceremony, with the straightforward grip of someone who had processed a thing and come out the other side of it. "Your father would be proud," Marsh said to Olivia, standing beside them. "He is here," Olivia said. Nathan turned and looked, and across the promenade, he saw an older man in a light jacket moving slowly with a cane, but moving. Richard Bennett, who had built this 30 years ago as a vision and had watched his daughter hold it through the hardest year of its history. Standing at the railing, looking at the water with the expression of a man who had lived long enough to see what he had started become what it was supposed to be. Olivia excused herself and walked across the promenade to her father. Nathan watched her take his arm, and the 2 of them stood at the railing together, for a while, in the October light. Sophie appeared at Nathan's elbow. "Who is that?" her father Nathan said. Sophie looked at them. "He looks like he is proud of her." "Yeah," Nathan said. "He does." Sophie leaned against Nathan's arm in the way she sometimes did without thinking about it, and he put his hand on her shoulder. And they stood there together, watching the district open itself to the city, the people moving along the promenade, the market building filling with noise and the smell of food, the kayak rental operation already doing business with a line of 4 people waiting, which made Nathan think he would have to tell Terry he had been right. The thing about redemption, the real kind, not the kind that happens in a single moment, but the kind that accumulates like sediment over months and years, is that you rarely feel it arriving. You just look up one day and find yourself standing somewhere you could not have imagined standing, in company you could not have imagined keeping. And the distance between there and here is so full of unglamorous specific work that you cannot point to the moment it changed. It just changed. One careful decision at a time. One honest conversation at a time. One Thursday morning sight walk at a time. One kid in a sweatshirt with baking soda on her chin at a time. Nathan Cross had walked into a restaurant in November to give his daughter a birthday dinner he could barely afford. A worn jacket that had seen better years, a resume that civilian hiring managers did not know how to read. He had not been trying to change anything. He had just seen something wrong and done something about it. The way he had always done. Not because he was brave or because he was calculating the outcome, but because he was the kind of person who could not look at something wrong and turn away. And that quality, which had sometimes made his life harder than it needed to be, had this time made it into something he had not known to want. He did not have language for gratitude that did not feel smaller than the thing itself. So he did not try. He just stood on the promenade with his daughter leaning against his arm and the salt air coming off the sound, and the city filling the space around them. And he let it be exactly what it was. Olivia came back across the promenade a few minutes later. She stood on Nathan's other side, not touching, but close, in the way of someone who had decided where they wanted to stand. "He wants to meet Sophie," she said quietly. Sophie looked up immediately. "I know about the original development plans," she said. "I have read about them." Olivia looked at her. "I know you have." She extended her hand. "Come on then, I will introduce you." Sophie took her hand, without hesitation, the clean, unself-conscious way children take the hands of people they have decided to trust, which they decide faster and more accurately than adults usually give them credit for. And the two of them walked off across the promenade together, toward the old man at the railing. Nathan watched them go. He put his hands in his jacket pockets and turned to face the water. The sound was flat and silver in the October afternoon. The mountains were clear on the far edge of it. The city ran along behind him, making its ordinary noise, and the promenade stretched out in both directions, full of people who had come to see something new and found it worth the trip. He stood there for a long while. It was, he thought, a good place to be.